Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Muñoz. Maria Muñoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico, to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Muñoz. She was one of 3 children, and her early life was marked by a significant loss when her mother passed away. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, who was 11 years her senior. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. Joel Pellet, a nursing student at the time, had big dreams, and Maria was also a nurse. After their wedding, they moved to Laredo, Texas, where Joel Pellet secured a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Maria Muñoz, 31, was a devoted stay-at-home mom in Laredo, Texas, dedicating her time to caring for her 2 young sons and her husband, Joel Pellet, 40. She had left her job to focus on raising her children, and her days were filled with activities like taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. Although she was happy at home with her children, she had always dreamed of returning to school to become a nurse again. On the surface, Joel Pellet's family looked perfect. Joel Pellet often shared family photos with friends and colleagues, proudly talking about his wonderful wife and children. However, beneath the surface, a different reality was taking place. In 2018, after the birth of their second son, people close to Joel Pellet noticed a significant change in his behavior. He lost weight, gained muscle, and became more outgoing, especially with women. His behavior was flirtatious and not what was expected of a married man. He also started removing photos of his wife and children from social media, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This change gave the impression that he was single. Around the same time, colleagues observed Joel Pellet growing closer to a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. It became clear that they were having an affair behind Maria's back. In early 2020, Maria discovered evidence of their relationship when she found airline tickets Joel Pellet had purchased for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This revelation devastated Maria, leaving her feeling heartbroken, depressed, and betrayed. She had trusted her husband and thought their marriage was strong, but the discovery shattered her trust. Maria's world was turned upside down when she discovered that her 10-year marriage was a sham. Overwhelmed with emotions, she felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the devastating truth. Seeking guidance, she began therapy sessions to cope with her mental health struggles, and her therapist prescribed medication to support her through this difficult time. As a way to process her emotions, Maria started keeping a journal to express her thoughts and feelings. As the situation between Maria and Joel Pellet continued to deteriorate, tensions escalated. On September 19, 2020, Maria visited Janet's house, where she found Joel Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Confronting him, Maria gave him an ultimatum: choose between her and Janet. Joel Pellet's response was clear: he chose Janet. The argument became heated, prompting Janet to call the police. However, by the time they arrived, Maria and Joel Pellet had already left the scene. Maria was driving with Joel Pellet when the police called her. She could hear him yelling in the background. When they arrived home, he became extremely angry and punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, demonstrating a disturbing level of aggression. The next morning, Maria sent Joel Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their issues. Joel Pellet responded, suggesting they handle the situation on their own to avoid the costs associated with hiring lawyers. However, just a few hours later, Joel Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an email expressing his deep sadness and emotional pain. In the email, Joel Pellet conveyed his desire to have an honest and calm conversation with Maria. Maria replied to the email, and they agreed to meet the following evening at around 5 p.m. On Monday, September 21st, before going to meet him, Maria was so nervous and then messaged her friend Yasmin Martinez that today they were going to meet. The next day, a terrifying turn of events unfolded. At around 1:40 a.m. on September 22, 2020, a distressed call was made to 911. Joel Pellet claimed that his wife may have ingested some prescription medication and was not breathing. DEA Officer Cruz was first on the scene and his body camera captured everything that happened next. He found Joel Pellet at the top of the stairs near the master bedroom, Joel Pellet dressed in hospital gown and performing CPR on Maria, while their son slept in a nearby room. When the paramedics arrived, they took charge of performing CPR on Maria. Meanwhile, another police officer approaches Joel Pellet to ask about the pills Maria took. Joel Pellet quickly retrieved a pill bottle from the nearby bathroom, handing it over to the officers. An examination of the bottle revealed that it contained clonazepam, a prescription medication used to treat anxiety, panic attacks, and sometimes epilepsy, prescribed in Joel Pellet's name, not Maria's. The officer noticed two suspicious details. First, the pill bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet, which is unusual in overdose cases where the bottle typically remains near the victim. Secondly, body camera footage showed Joel Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket before claiming to have found it in the bathroom. DEA Officer Cruz wondered why he would need to retrieve the pills, which made him suspect that Joel Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious discovery was a needle catheter on the stairs of their home. This seemed odd to him. Joel Pellet and Maria had two young children, so finding a needle on the stairs raised questions about why it was there. Investigations revealed more than just a needle at the scene. A medical bag was found containing syringes and equipment, all neatly packed. While this might seem ordinary for an anesthesia nurse like Maria, the presence of these medical tools outside a hospital setting sparked questions for investigators. Joel Pellet told officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression, which had gotten worse recently. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Maria could not be saved. Tragically, she was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria was declared dead, the officers took Joel Pellet downstairs to the kitchen for further questioning. Joel Pellet explained that he and Maria had met earlier that day to talk, during which they became intimate. Afterward, he took a shower, and when he came out, he found Maria sleeping. When he returned upstairs, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. As Joel Pellet spoke with the officer, his behavior seemed unusual. He was sweating heavily and struggled to answer basic questions about what happened. The officer noted that Joel Pellet's level of sweating was noticeably higher than anyone else present, including the first responder who had been trying to save Maria's life for the past 2 hours. This raised the officer's suspicion, leading them to take Joel Pellet to the police station with Sergeant Lisa Mata for more questioning. Joel Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room at the police station for a period of time before an officer arrived. Unbeknownst to him, his every move was being recorded on video. When officers reviewed the footage, they were shocked to see Joel Pellet's sudden and extreme behavior. He began screaming, crying, and hitting the walls, and even threw furniture around the room. His outburst was so loud that it frightened people in the hallway and nearby rooms. At 4 a.m., Sergeant Lewis Matt entered the room to speak with Joel Pellet. During their conversation, Joel Pellet opened up about the events leading up to Maria's death. He also made a shocking confession: he had been involved with another woman, Janet, and had been living with her for 5 months prior to Maria's death. Joel Pellet revealed that he had been in a relationship with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair. According to Joel Pellet, on the night of Maria's death, he visited the home to discuss their marriage with Maria. After their conversation, they became intimate. Joel Pellet claimed that he thought Maria was asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. Joel Pellet also confessed to giving Maria the medication clonazepam, which had been prescribed to him to help with anxiety and depression. However, he was unable to provide details about the dosage or how many pills were left in the bottle before Maria took them. Despite further questioning, Joel Pellet was unable to provide any additional information to clarify the situation. After the interrogation, he was released. The next step in the investigation was to perform Maria's autopsy, which took place just 8 hours after her death. This quick turnaround meant that any substance that had caused her death should still be present in her stomach contents. However, when the autopsy results came in, they revealed a surprising twist: no pills were found in her stomach. Instead, the medical examiner's report revealed a small, red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow. This mark was concerning because it suggested that Maria may have been injected with something. The discovery of this mark led investigators to explore its significance and potential connection to her death. As they dug deeper, they discovered a journal at Maria's house. Maria had started keeping a journal to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, helping investigators identify the culprit behind her death. Maria's journal revealed her heartbreaking experiences and thoughts. Despite knowing her husband Joel Pellet wanted to be with someone else, Maria wanted to preserve their family and expressed her love for him. In her journal entries, she poured out her emotions, detailing the pain of Joel Pellet leaving their home in Laredo and leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. Her diary and cell phone recordings also helped investigators uncover Joel Pellet's abusive behavior. Maria's journal entries exposed her emotional journey, from grief and heartbreak to healing and newfound hope for the future. She wrote about feeling trapped in a constant internal battle. She begged for her emotional turmoil to end, describing how her past haunted her, her present was confusing, and her future was uncertain. In a poignant cry for help, Maria turned to a higher power, pleading for an end to her suffering. She asked for laughter, peace, and happiness to return to her life, and for her heart and mind to be free from pain and torture. Maria Muñoz's journal entries from the day before her death revealed her desire to move forward with her life. There was no indication of suicidal thoughts or plans to end her life. As a result, investigators initially ruled out the possibility of suicide. To gain a deeper understanding of the circumstances surrounding her death, they sought additional information. Dr. John Hunsinger, anesthesiologist, reviewed the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective, DEA Cruz, to express his concerns. Dr. John Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators subsequently conducted. In January 2021, Sergeant Louis Matt and DEA Cruz received toxicology test results that contradicted Joel Pellet's claim that Maria had been given clonazepam. The report actually showed that Maria's body did not have that drug. However, it revealed something more astonishing: the presence of 7 other powerful drugs. These medications, typically used in surgical procedures, included morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, and ketamine, as well as lidocaine and Naren. Specifically, propofol and ketamine are commonly used as sedatives and painkillers during surgeries. Administered through and for. The unusual presence of these drugs was significant, as they are tightly controlled and rarely accessed outside of anesthesiology departments, making it difficult for even many medical professionals to obtain them. The discovery of propofol in Maria's system was the most startling revelation for the investigators. Investigators believe that Joel Pellet, as a nurse anesthetist, had access to propofol due to his profession. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Joel Pellet and had experience with propofol, was shocked by the amount found in Maria's system, saying it was the highest amount he had ever seen. This led doctors to believe that propofol was the direct cause of Maria's death. They reasoned that, given his profession, Joel Pellet would have known the proper dosage to either anesthetize someone or cause an overdose. Additionally, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested that she may have been injected with some substance. Considering the autopsy report, Joel Pellet's suspicious behavior. And Maria's journal entries, the investigators believed they had enough evidence to arrest Joel Pellet for the murder of his wife. An arrest warrant was promptly issued, and authorities took Joel Pellet into custody without incident, as if he had anticipated and accepted his fate. Joel Pellet was then taken to the police station, marking a new phase in the investigation. The trial started on March 21, 2023. As the legal proceedings unfolded, both the prosecution and defense presented their cases. A prosecution team composed entirely of women known as Maria's team utilized Maria Muñoz's journal entries to construct a compelling case against Joel Pellet. By sharing Maria's diary entries, prosecutors wanted to show the jury that Maria was a wonderful, caring, and intelligent mother whose vibrant spirit shone through the pages of her diary. The prosecutors alleged that Joel Pellet first drugged Maria by lacing her drink with a substance to make her sleepy. Once she was unconscious, they believed he injected her with propofol. Additionally, they suspected that Joel Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, waiting long enough to ensure that first responders would be unable to revive her when they arrived. The prosecution team stated that Maria's journals helped them understand the challenges she faced, which fueled their determination to seek justice in her case. Roberto Bali, Joel Pellet's lawyer, informed the jury that his client had been trying to work on his marriage with Maria Muñoz before her death. Roberto Bali noted that the medical examiner's report still did not clearly state the cause of Maria's death, and there was not enough evidence to prove Joel Pellet was responsible for her death. Roberto Bali pointed out that Joel Pellet had given Maria a medication called Naren, used to counteract overdoses, on the night she died. He also acknowledged that both Joel Pellet and Maria had struggled with drug addiction in the past. However, Roberto Bali argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of trauma or coercion on her body. Despite this, investigators found that Maria did not have a history of drug addiction and that Joel Pellet was the only one who could have provided her with the large quantity of propofol. Maria was murdered, and Joel Pellet was put on trial for the crime. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel Pellet had given Maria a substance to calm her down, and he had brought home drugs, including propofol, from work. The jury quickly reached a verdict, finding Joel Pellet guilty of murder after just 1 hour of deliberation. The trial lasted for 9 days, concluding on March 30, 2023, with the guilty verdict. Joel Pellet was later sentenced to life in prison for the murder, plus an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence and a $10,000 fine. This sentence was handed down on April 27, 2023. The motive behind Joel Pellet's killing of his wife Maria Muñoz is not entirely clear, but the prosecution believes it was driven by his desire to end his marriage and start a new relationship with his girlfriend Janet Arridan. As a result, Joel Pellet was held accountable for his actions. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Len Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Ammer on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services, despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood, and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery, and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, The investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Amma was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. Brad Sickett came into this world on March 3, 1976, in the quaint town of Kingman, Kansas, USA. As the only child of Janet Sickett and her husband, whose name and details from his previous marriage remain strictly confidential, Brad had an interesting family dynamic. Janet had another son, Robert, from her previous marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Sickett family had deep roots in law enforcement, resulting in a household characterized by strict discipline. Though information about Brad's childhood is scarce, it is documented that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was tall and sturdy, traits that enabled him to pursue wrestling and bodybuilding during his high school years. His dedication to physical fitness soon paid off, as he excelled in various inter-school tournaments, often securing first place. This success turned him into a star wrestler and a notable figure within his school. At 16, while competing at a major wrestling event in the Kansas City Coliseum, Brad met a girl named Vashti Forrest. Born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, Vashti was Julie Hostler and Clinton Forrest's third child. She had an older brother named Rich and an older sister named Catherine. A younger sister named Tyler completed their family. Vashti possessed a noble spirit and enjoyed the affectionate support of her siblings, especially Catherine and Rich, who treated her with special care. In contrast, Julie wasn't particularly affectionate and often verbally abused her children. Despite these challenges at home, Vashi's outgoing personality earned her a large circle of friends. Though she received much love from those around her, Vashi struggled with self-esteem issues. She didn't feel beautiful or intelligent enough, and often sought approval from others. This quest for approval sometimes undermined her confidence. Nonetheless, Vashi became a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team, a role she loved passionately. She never missed any matches, which led to her fateful encounter with Brad at one such event. Brad immediately caught Vashi's eye. She was deeply attracted to him from their first meeting. He instantly asked her out, fascinated by his boldness. The girl yes, and they both felt it during that initial meeting. From then on, they became inseparable. After graduation, the girl went to the University of UO, and the guy honored his family traditions by joining the police academy. However, during this period, they spent less time together, which profoundly affected Brett, who was already starting to show signs of a controlling and irascible nature. His increasing jealousy eventually became too much for Vashi to handle. Tired and overwhelmed, she decided to end the relationship. The breakup was neither violent nor traumatic. Both went on with their lives. After graduating from the police academy, Brett joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, just 50 kilometers from Kingman. Despite time passing and achieving career milestones, he couldn't forget Vashi. Deep down, he still loved her and never gave up the hope of reuniting with her. When an opportunity presented itself, he visited her and shared how regularly attending church had transformed him into a new man through his faith. Brett's words appeared sincere to Vashi, perhaps due to faith or genuine love, leading her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brett didn't want any delays. He informed her family of his intentions and asked for her hand in marriage. Her parents, Julie and Clinton Forrest, were delighted by this news. They believed Brett and Vashi made a wonderful couple and anticipated a happy marriage. The wedding took place in 2004. Brett and Vashi settled in a peaceful neighborhood in Kingman, where they made new friends, including Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to barbecues in his garden. It seemed like the perfect setting for establishing their new home. However, sometimes Vashi noticed that Brett's unpleasant side resurfaced sporadically. Problems cropped up repeatedly due to his dominant disposition. When Vashi became pregnant, though, these differences seemed to fade away temporarily. In fall 2006, their first son Brandon was born. 2 years later came another son named Bronson. The experience of recent parenthood brought about a realization for both of them. The inherent risks associated with Brett's job as a police officer required careful planning for their children's future welfare if one of them were ever absent. After thorough consideration and analysis of their situation, they chose guardianship arrangements for Brandon and Bronson should it ever become necessary. Brett's brother, Robert, worked as a trainer at the police facility in Vashi. Meanwhile, she dedicated herself fully to raising their children and managing household chores. In her spare moments, she penned down her feelings in a diary. Although Brett was a loving and devoted father, his behavior could be somewhat rough with the children during playtime, often treating them like adults. Even though Brett's violent tendencies appeared controlled, it seemed they were waiting to break free. One day at work, Brett used excessive force to subdue an inmate by slamming his head against a concrete wall. The victim sustained a fractured skull and brain damage and died a few days later. Brett faced a lawsuit for excessive use of force, but received full support from his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing him of all charges. Brett did not show remorse. Instead, he admitted to colleagues that he enjoyed violence, especially when punishing those he deemed bad people. Later on, Brett and another officer forcibly subdued a defendant who had lost control and resisted removal from the courtroom for contempt of court. This action drew praise and resulted in both officers receiving a bronze medal from the sheriff for their meritorious behavior. Despite Vashi's love for her children, she still had career aspirations. Recognizing the emptiness she felt inside, she sought and secured employment as the new human resources manager at Vito's communications company. Brett took this development ambivalently. Ideally, he wanted his wife to focus solely on household duties and the education of their children, Brendan and Bronson. It wasn't long before he began to complain about Vashi spending too much time at work, a role he didn't accept her having in the first place. Consequently, their arguments increased significantly. For the sake of their children's well-being, Vashi made extensive efforts to mend their marriage, but felt it was all in vain. She had an intuition that this situation would end badly. With the aim of resolving their conflicts, Vashi and Brett began seeing Connie Sodman, a clinical social worker, during initial sessions. Vashi expressed feelings of profound loneliness and isolation, considering couples therapy as a potential last effort to salvage their marriage. However, when she broached the topic of divorce, Brett became extremely upset, resulting in weeks of psychological harassment. He threatened to kill her if she attempted to leave, claiming he could manipulate her death to appear as a suicide because of his position as a police officer. He even mentioned the possibility of burning down their home to destroy any evidence. In the days that followed, Brett had a one-on-one meeting with Kai, in which he declared furiously that if Vashi continued pursuing divorce, he would ensure she never saw their children, Brendan or Bronson, again. He further vowed that he wouldn't hesitate to take them out of the country. In early 2011, Brett transitioned from patrolling the streets to becoming a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashi began feeling much better than she had in recent years. She continued therapy and implemented healthy changes such as exercising regularly and improving her diet. The decision to divorce gradually became more definite for Vashi. While she felt sadness about the end of her marriage, she predominantly experienced relief and optimism regarding her future. To enhance the effects of physical activity, she started taking an appetite suppressant, despite knowing it might have side effects like depression. Within a few months, Vashi's social life became very active. She expanded her contacts at work and met someone she found attractive. She confided in her older sister Kathleen about her fears concerning Brett's discovery of her plans due to potential repercussions. Vashi also spoke candidly with her coworkers about various threats from Brett. During this time, Brett discovered Vashi was keeping a personal diary without her knowledge and took it to his office to scan and print some pages. He spent considerable time researching information on suicides, fire-related injuries, homicides versus suicides, and their causes. In the first week of April 2011, Vashi attended a final individual session with Kai due to concerns about how Brett would respond upon receiving the divorce petition. Together, they developed a protection plan for herself and their children. When the man received the papers, Brett arrived at his office on the morning of 29th. To his surprise, he found an envelope containing divorce papers. After lunch, he discovered a projector in the pantry. He used it to project handwriting from Vasa's diary, traced it, and then wrote a goodbye note to his children. At same time, Brett printed out documents on how to kill a person and pass it off as suicide. He then asked the maintenance staff how best to dispose of computer hard drives. After researching their recommendations, Brett used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained scanned images. Following this, he threw the waste into a dumpster. Later on, Brett drove to a convenience store and bought gasoline, which he loaded into his van. Several hours later, he pleaded with Vashti to let him spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children. The man promised to leave the next morning. Although they discussed joint finances, Brett again begged Vashti to change her mind about the divorce. However, when he saw she was determined to proceed, he soon renewed his threats. Exhausted from fruitless arguments, Vashti retired to her room to sleep while Brett stayed downstairs on the couch. Around 3:15 a.m., he went upstairs with a gun in his hand and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake watching television heard the shot, but did not pay much attention. Meanwhile, Brett placed the next to Vashti's lifeless body and staged the scene to fake a suicide. He then doused the hallway and bedroom with gasoline and took her cell phone, calling himself from it. Subsequently, he took Brendan and Bronson to a safe house. When everything was ready, he started the fire. The flames quickly engulfed the main room and caused cartridges still in the chamber of the gun to start firing. Neighbors woke up startled at around 3:45 a.m., initially thinking there was a shooting. By 3:57 a.m., 911 operators received a desperate call from Brett, who said that his wife had shot herself. When emergency responders arrived on scene, they found the first floor of the house burning with Brett outside in Vashti's car, along with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was in the house, and Brett replied that his wife was still inside. He further claimed that Vashti had shot herself due to depression, but had asked him beforehand to take their children somewhere safe. He stated that although he tried to save her, smoke and fire prevented him from doing so. When firefighters managed to control the flames, they found Vashti's body in the master bedroom. There on the bed, just below the body, investigators found a .44 caliber revolver with the barrel toward her feet and a 5-gallon container of gasoline lying in the middle of the bed. That morning, Brett called Kai and explained what had happened. He was upset and even expressed his guilt, noting that he felt responsible for bringing his wife to this tragic end. In front of his co-workers, he maintained his CB by repeating the same details he shared with investigators. 2 days later, officers discovered Vash's diary in her car. On the last page was a handwritten letter and suicide note taken in for forensic examination. The forensic report determined Vash died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head. She also sustained gunshot wounds to her torso and thigh. Blood and lung tests were negative for smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide, normally present in fire victims. The burns on her body prevented the examiner from concluding if it was homicide or suicide. Despite Brett's threats about committing a perfect crime making it look like suicide to avoid punishment, things didn't go as planned. Police soon noticed inconsistencies in Brett's story. For instance, there were no signs of dirt, blood, or wounds on him. Another inconsistency was the position of the gun with its barrel pointing downward. This raised questions about the alleged suicide. David Fetty, a special agent with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, questioned how the weapon ended up under the body. He confirmed that if Vash had shot herself in a horizontal position, the weapon would have fallen to the floor. If she had done it sitting up, it would have remained on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet did not support that Vash shot herself behind her right ear. Due to these discrepancies, David decided to dig deeper into the case. Further investigation led officers to discover documents detailing how to kill someone and make it look like suicide. While analyzing Vash's diary entry, they noticed a discrepancy in handwriting compared to her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarley concluded that the note was forged. Witnesses also reported seeing Brett destroying hard drives a day before Vash's death. Testimony from a neighbor indicated hearing a fatal gunshot at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Brett called 911. This confirmed David Fetty's suspicions about play. On May 13, 2011, police arrested Brad. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 additional charges of endangering his sons. Brendan and Bronson were subsequently placed in the care of Kathleen. During questioning, Brad described Vashti as not being the cheerful and balanced woman she portrayed herself to be. On the contrary, she suffered from insecurity and depression due to their rocky marriage and threats he made about taking the children away. Brad also added that after filing for divorce, Vashti felt deep depression and remorse. Consequently, she set a fire and shot herself. Despite these claims, police didn't believe him. The trial commenced on June 10, 2013. During opening statements, Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley presented her perspective to the jury and argued that no one knows better than a police officer that fire destroys evidence. When questioned about a projector, Brad stated he had used it to demonstrate to cadets How to Create a Fake Security Scenario Through a Real-Life Exercise. A forensic document examiner testified regarding the forged letter and burnt hard drives. Concerning these items, Brad claimed he destroyed them to protect his personal information, not because he needed to hide anything illicit. His attorney, Roger Falk, mentioned that Vashti had suffered from depression since high school and that her condition worsened with diet drug use. Brad's brother Robert also testified in court and supported his brother's claims by confirming that he had observed Vashti feeling depressed and sad in the 2 weeks leading up to her death. In contrast, another witness informed the jury that while Vashti indeed suffered from depression at the start of therapy, it was mainly due to the circumstances of her marriage rather than a clinical mental health issue. Recently, she had been feeling anxious about her future. The account from Rich Vash's brother echoed this sentiment, recounting the emotional turmoil in his nephews' lives. Their innocence had been shattered by Brett, leaving them deprived of the chance to get to know their parents better. Prors portrayed Brett as manipulative, claiming he used his law enforcement experience to distort facts. In response, the defense stuck to its version of the alleged suicide, highlighting that even a seasoned medical examiner couldn't determine who was at fault for the victim's death. Brett, meanwhile, portrayed himself as a loving husband and devoted father, weighed down by his wife's desire to separate. He also accused Kingman County District Judge Larry Solomoto of seeking publicity and launched into a tirade accusing the judge of seeking a ruling against him to gain a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. In the end, the jury found Brett guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Larry sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and added 6 years for other charges because they would be tried consecutively. So, Brett will be eligible for parole after more than 31 years. Judge Larry also considered that Brett did not plead guilty and lied to avoid responsibility and showed no remorse. In 2015, Brett appealed his conviction, but the Kansas Supreme Court denied his appeal and upheld the original conviction. Brendan and Bronson's uncertain future initiated a custody battle between maternal and paternal families. Kathleen filed for custody on grounds that she had already cared for them for 102 days. As neither party could reach an agreement, the custody decision was left to the judge. However, it's important to note that there's been no news yet on the outcome of this custody battle so far. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jackie Vandergriff. Jacqueline "Jackie" Vandergriff was born on March 4, 1992, in Carrollton, Texas. As the youngest of 2 daughters, she grew up in the colony, Frisco, Texas, surrounded by a loving family. From a young age, Jackie exhibited a natural talent for gymnastics. Before she could walk, she was already somersaulting, and her parents recognized her potential at just 3 years old. They enrolled her in gymnastics courses, and over the following years, she refined her skills and enthusiastically participated in various competitions. She eventually reached level 5 in the Texas State Gymnastics Association. Those who knew Jackie characterized her as a warm and compassionate person with a heart of gold. She genuinely cared about the well-being of others and was a loyal friend who inspired her loved ones to be the best versions of themselves. The comfort and joy she brought to those around her were palpable. Her kindness extended beyond human relationships, as she had a deep love for animals, was a lifelong vegetarian, and believed in supporting pet adoption from no-kill shelters. Jackie's passion for reading was unmatched, with the Harry Potter series ranking high on her list of favorites. Immersing herself in the magical world of Hogwarts was a regular escape for her. Besides reading, Jackie had a deep affection for music, boasting an eclectic taste that spanned from Pink to James Taylor and Rob Thomas. Her love for musicals was particularly strong, with Rent being a favorite she would attend every local performance of. After graduating from Wakeland High School in Frisco, Jackie went on to pursue a career in cosmetology at the Paul Mitchell School. She successfully completed her training and earned her license as an esthetician. Not one to rest on her laurels, Jackie opted to further her education at Texas Woman's University, where she majored in nutrition and food science. She firmly believed that good nutrition was essential and advocated for everyone's access to proper nourishment. Her ultimate vision was to educate others about the significance of healthy eating, empowering them to make informed choices. Jackie Vandergriff seemed destined for greatness, a college junior on track to achieve her dreams and make a positive impact on the world. However, a chance encounter with an evil person in the summer of 2016 would devastate her life forever. On Wednesday, September 14, 2016, shortly after dawn, a Grapevine Police Department officer in Grapevine, Texas, received a distressing call. The caller reported finding a body near Grapevine Lake. When the officer arrived at the scene, they found a scorched area with a plastic blue kiddie pool containing a badly burned body. The body was charred beyond recognition, making it impossible to determine its identity, age, or gender. The badly burned remains of a body were taken to the medical examiner's office, where fingerprint identification later confirmed that they belonged to 24-year-old Jackie Vandergriff. As detectives investigated Jackie's final hours, they discovered that she was last seen in Denton, near the college, where she had visited two bars, Fry Street Public House and Shots and Crafts. The autopsy conducted by the medical examiner revealed the shocking extent of Jackie's injuries. She had been killed, dismembered, decapitated, and set on fire. Most disturbingly, her killer had removed her heart. As news of Jackie's brutal murder spread throughout Denton, detectives began receiving tips from people claiming to have seen a suspicious man near the crime scene, where a fire had been set. The detectives eventually obtained CCTV footage from the two bars Jackie had visited around the time of her death. At 7 p.m., a man entered the Fry Street Public House, where he sat at the bar and had a drink. An hour later, Jackie arrived and struck up a conversation with the bartender and the man. Security footage captured their interaction, providing valuable clues about their possible connection. After spending about 45 minutes at the Fry Street Public House, Jackie posted a tweet at around 8:45 p.m., saying she was glad she decided to get off Tinder and walk to a bar. Shortly after, Jackie and the man left the bar together and headed to Shots and Crafts, where they joined a group of women around 9:45 p.m. The pair left Shots and Crafts together. The detectives used CCTV footage to track Jackie and the man she was with, following their journey to the convenience store where the man had parked his car. Jackie was seen getting into the car, and at that point, everything seemed fine. However, this was the last time Jackie was seen alive before her murder. The detectives interviewed the bartender at the Fry Street Public House, where Jackie had gone to apply for a job. The bartender remembered Jackie having a friendly conversation with him and a male customer, but he had no information about what happened to Jackie and the man after they left. The detectives also reviewed security footage from Shots and Crafts, where Jackie was seen with the man and a group of women. One of the women remembered receiving a business card from the man, who was a personal trainer. She had exchanged contact information with him because she was interested in fitness. Although this detail seemed insignificant at first, it would later prove to be a crucial discovery in the investigation. To their amazement, the woman still had the card in her hand and was more than willing to share the information with the investigators. On the card, they found the name Charles Bryant. By that time, the detectives had already obtained footage from Walmart, taken at 4 a.m., which clearly showed Charles buying a shovel. The detectives then conducted a thorough investigation to uncover the true identity of Charles Bryant, who was the last person seen with Jackie before her murder. Their discoveries proved to be deeply unsettling. Charles Bryant, a 29-year-old man, lived about 20 miles away from Denton, but for some reason, the city held a strong attraction for him. What was drawing him to Denton was a desperate attempt to rekindle his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, who was a resident of Grapevine and a student at the University of North Texas. In May 2016, Caitlin graduated from high school and met Charles Bryant at the restaurant where she worked in Grapevine, Texas. Charles, a personal trainer and bartender in his late 20s, stood out from the boys Caitlin knew from school. His tattoos showcased his muscular build, and Caitlin found his unique skills and mysterious nature intriguing. That summer, Caitlin and Charles spent most days together at Grapevine Lake, and their attraction grew stronger daily. While Caitlin was captivated by Charles, her mother grew concerned about their significant age gap and worried about her daughter's well-being. Caitlin's mother asked to see a picture of Charles, and initially, she was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. However, when she looked into his piercing eyes, she felt an instant sense of unease. It was as if she was staring directly at evil. As her concern for her daughter's well-being grew, she voiced her worries to Caitlin, urging her to reconsider the relationship. But Caitlin dismissed her mother's warnings, insisting that Charles was nice to her, unaware of the sinister nature lurking beneath his charming facade. At first, Caitlin was happy with her new boyfriend, but as time passed, doubts began to creep in. She started questioning whether her mother had been right. Charles seemed overly self-absorbed and manipulative, and Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that he had an inflated sense of self-importance. He would constantly remind her that she could never find anyone better than him, making her feel bad about herself. By mid-August 2016, Caitlin was preparing to leave for college in Denton, and she had decided to end her relationship with Charles due to the numerous red flags she had noticed. However, Charles showed up at her home the next day, pleading with her to give him another chance and promising to change. Caitlin was persuaded, and they got back together. Only a week later, Caitlin moved to Denton to start her freshman year at college. After settling in, she finally broke up with Charles for good. Charles, however, refused to accept the breakup. On August 24th, the police found Charles on the University of North Texas campus during a traffic stop. They initially suspected him of driving under the influence, but his blood alcohol level was within the legal limit. Instead, he was arrested on several outstanding warrants and subsequently released. Charles returned to the University of North Texas several hours later and knocked on Caitlin's dorm room door, which he had surprisingly tracked down. When Caitlin answered, she immediately called 911, and by the time the officer arrived, Charles had already disappeared. The officer questioned Caitlin, who explained that she had ended their relationship due to Charles' abusive behavior and the way he spoke to her. As a result, the officer issued Charles a temporary no-trespass order, prohibiting him from entering the UNT campus. Despite this, Charles was undeterred and determined to find ways to reach Caitlin, despite the restrictions. On August 31st, Charles coincidentally encountered Caitlin on her first day at a new job. Recognizing him, Caitlin asked Charles to leave. She then scheduled a meeting with her manager to discuss the situation and request that Charles be barred from entering the business premises. However, the manager regretfully informed Caitlin that he lacked the authority to grant her request. This incident ultimately forced Caitlin to quit her job. Despite her best efforts to avoid him, Charles was more determined than ever to confront Caitlin. He was hell-bent on exacting revenge and causing her even more harm. The vicious cycle of fear and intimidation continued, driven by Charles's all-consuming obsession, putting Caitlin's life in constant danger. Meanwhile, Caitlin's decision to stay on campus at the University of North Texas worried her mother sick. Her mother begged her to return home, where they could keep her safe, but Caitlin was adamant that she was safe in her dorm room. She felt secure within the university's walls. On September 6th, a terrifying incident shook Caitlin to her core when Charles suddenly showed up at her dorm on campus. As he pounded on her door, Caitlin's worst fears took over, and she hid in her roommate's closet. From her hiding place, she could hear Charles coaxing her to come out, claiming he had something for her. Her darkest fears began to materialize, and her mind raced with frightening scenarios of what Charles might have planned for her. Caitlin was terrified for her life, so she made a quick decision and called 111 from inside the closet, speaking in a whisper because she was afraid Charles could hear her. The dispatcher asked her to speak up several times, but Caitlin was too scared to talk clearly. No matter how hard the dispatcher tried, Caitlin's voice was barely loud enough to be heard because she was so frightened. The police arrived soon, but Charles had already run away. However, he left a creepy reminder that he had been there, flowers, and a 2-page handwritten letter addressed to Caitlin. The letter had disturbing messages that made the young woman even more afraid. Just a few minutes after the incident, the police caught Charles outside the campus, dressed in exercise clothes, as if he had been jogging. As a student, he was arrested for trespassing and released on bail a few hours later. Despite Caitlin's efforts to cut off all contact with Charles by blocking him on her phone, email, and social media, he kept finding new ways to reach her. Charles created multiple accounts to make sure he could still communicate with her. Recognizing that Charles's behavior had become increasingly threatening, the police intervened to help Caitlin obtain a protective court order. The very next day, she formally filed a petition for the order, which granted her legal protection against further harassment. However, despite his first arrest, Charles continued to attempt to contact Caitlin. These unwanted communications led to his second arrest for stalking, as he repeatedly violated the terms of the protective order. It was his third arrest within 2 weeks of his second arrest. Charles posted a $5,000 bond and was released from custody while out on bail. Charles Bryant went to Fry Street, a location where Caitlin frequently spent time. Although there was only circumstantial evidence, detectives were certain that Charles had met Jackie Vander Griff there, possibly linking him to Jackie's murder. However, no physical evidence existed. When the detectives assisting Caitlin with her stalking case at UNT learned that Charles was the prime suspect in a murder, they grew concerned for Caitlin's safety. Caitlin claimed she was okay, but in the days following Jackie's murder, Charles sent her numerous photos, texts, and emails. On September 18th, the police took Charles into custody for violating Caitlin's protective order. During his incarceration, detectives hoped to uncover more evidence linking Charles to Jackie's murder. While being interrogated, Charles was shown a picture of Jackie and claimed to have seen her at the bar, but denied knowing anything about her. Concurrently, a search warrant was executed at Charles's residence. The search yielded a large military-style knife and a Texas Woman's University purse, which was identified as Jackie's school purse. Additionally, the search team found a kiddie pool that had gone missing from Charles's backyard, matching the one where Jackie's body was discovered. The detectives sought the expertise of a seasoned professional who had worked with prolific killers, including the Texas Rangers. This expert was knowledgeable about the mentalities of individuals like Charles, aware that they often have a strong urge to discuss their crimes. When the interview started, Charles claimed to have no memory of Jackie. However, the expert suspected he was hiding something. The expert thought Charles knew more about Jackie's fate than he was letting on. To build trust, the expert created a relaxed atmosphere, making the conversation feel like a casual chat between friends at a bar. The expert suggested possible scenarios, trying to see if Charles would react or take the bait. They portrayed Jackie as the one who had led Charles on, causing frustration. Throughout the conversation, the expert used different tactics to gauge Charles's reactions. However, this approach was risky. If the expert pushed too hard or seemed insincere, they might lose Charles's trust and harm the investigation. So, the expert had to find a balance, staying friendly while trying to get Charles to reveal the truth. During an interview, an expert closely watched Charles's responses and body language to gain insight into his character. The expert pretended to help Charles recall the events surrounding Jackie's admission, but in reality was conducting a brief memory test. To the expert's surprise, Charles' story changed slightly during the test. At first, Charles claimed he knew nothing about Jackie's admission, but later revealed that he had spoken to her at the Fry Street Public House when she applied for a job. As the conversation continued, the expert decided to take a different approach. They ordered pizza, hoping the food would help Charles relax, and the detectives could uncover the motive behind Jackie's murder. The detectives suspected that Charles' uncontrollable rage towards his ex-girlfriend, Caitlin, was the catalyst behind Jackie's death. The interrogation lasted around 3 hours, during which Charles admitted to unintentionally killing Jackie during what he called kinky sex. He claimed the incident occurred in his car, and Jackie had asked him to choke her with an oversized zip tie he had. However, Charles maintained that the death was an accident. When Charles Bryant was accused of murdering Jackie Vag Riff, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin went on social media to look at Jackie's Facebook page, only to discover they were already friends. It suddenly came to Caitlin's mind that she had received a friend request from Jackie's Facebook page on the very day Jackie's body was found. Before Caitlin was even aware of the case, she was convinced that her ex-boyfriend, Charlie, who was the suspect in Jackie's murder, must have used Jackie's phone to send her the friend request. Additionally, the police also believed that a tweet sent from Jackie's account after her death, which read, "Never knew I could feel like this," was actually sent by Charles after he murdered her. Christy was shocked when she learned that Charles, a man she had met on a dating app a year earlier, was facing a murder charge. To her, Charles was a quiet and reserved person. But during their brief time together, she noticed some disturbing signs that raised her concerns. Christy said that Charles quickly became clingy and attached to her, which eventually led her to end their relationship. But Charles persisted in pursuing her, going so far as to profess his desperate love for her. This declaration caught Christy off guard, especially since they had never even shared a kiss. Christy's experience working with abused children gave her a unique insight that helped her identify certain patterns in Charles's behavior. This led her to suspect that he might have been a victim of childhood abuse, a pattern she had seen in some of the young clients she worked with. One day, Christy found the courage to ask Charles directly if he had been abused as a child. To her surprise, Charles confessed that he had indeed suffered trauma in his childhood. Although the police couldn't verify Charles's claims, Christy believed him. She maintained contact with him, albeit from a distance, because she felt sympathy for him and didn't think he was capable of murder. The autopsy of Jackie's body failed to provide clear answers about her cause of death and where she was killed before being dismembered and set on fire. The lack of insight from the autopsy results raised concerns for the prosecution, leaving key questions unanswered about the circumstances surrounding Jackie's death. Charles admitted to disposing of Jackie's body, claiming she had died accidentally during rough intercourse. Despite this, he pleaded not guilty to her murder. Caitlin, Charles's ex-girlfriend, was called to testify by the prosecution to share her experiences with his stalking behavior and violent tendencies. The goal was to establish a connection between his anger towards Caitlin and the eventual murder of Jackie, who bore a striking resemblance to Caitlin. When Caitlin took the stand, she was visibly uncomfortable and reluctantly identified Charles, commenting that he had a smirk. Overcome with emotion, she left the courtroom in tears. The judge ultimately ruled that Caitlin would not be allowed to share details of her relationship with Charles or their breakup with the jury. In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie's tragic death, Charles Bryant went on trial for her murder. However, Jackie's best friend was too traumatized to attend the trial, finding it unbearable to face Charles in person. The thought of confronting him was a painful reminder of the devastation he had caused to their lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was born on March 8, 2001 in Tracy, San Joaquin County. She grew up in Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy, California, living with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings. Although her parents, Maria and Daniel, were separated, the children remained close to their father through regular phone calls. Sandra was a friendly and outgoing child who made friends easily and was well liked by both kids and adults in the neighborhood. She loved playing outside with her friends. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and was excited to share her day with her family. Later that afternoon, she went out to play with her friends in the neighborhood, as she usually did. Before leaving the house, Sandra changed into her favorite Hello Kitty top and black leggings and hugged her mother. When dinner time approached at 7 p.m., Sandra had not returned home, which made her mother, Maria, anxious. Maria tried calling some of Sandra's friends to see if she was with them, but no one had seen her. As her worries grew, Maria drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had seen her for hours. At 7:53 p.m., Maria made an urgent call to 911 for help. When Maria reported her daughter Sandra missing, the Tracy Police Department responded promptly to the mobile home park. They initiated a thorough search of the neighborhood, questioning Maria about Sandra's clothing at the time of her disappearance. Maria recalled that Sandra was last seen wearing a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then conducted a door-to-door inquiry, speaking with neighbors to determine if anyone had seen Sandra or observed anything unusual in the area. They also displayed Sandra's picture to all residents. The officers demonstrated a high level of commitment to finding Sandra and identifying potential leads, evident in their meticulous questioning of neighbors and dissemination of Sandra's images in the hope of ensuring her safe return. On March 27th, the police were unable to find any trace of Sandra. The following day, March 28th, they sought help from the FBI, launching a massive search operation. This effort involved cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a large team of volunteers dedicated to finding the missing 8-year-old girl. Detectives also showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the area, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Unfortunately, no one had any leads. The search for Sandra was a traumatic experience for the Tracy community. Dozens of local volunteers joined 230 professional search and rescue personnel from 16 different agencies to thoroughly search the town for any signs of her. The U.S. Coast Guard further assisted the aerial search over Tracy by deploying a C-13 military plane equipped with state-of-the-art cameras. Sandra's disappearance quickly gained widespread media attention. Authorities initially offered a $2,000 reward for information that could help locate her or uncover clues about her disappearance. As her case received significant media coverage, the reward amount was increased to $30,000. The search for Sandra, an 8-year-old Tracy girl, continues this morning. According to investigators, Sandra Cantu went missing after walking away from her home at the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy. One of the estimated 300 volunteers who joined the search over the weekend expressed their hope that Sandra would be found and returned to her family and friends. Sandra is a Hispanic girl, 4 feet tall, and weighs 45 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Surveillance footage shows Sandra leaving the mobile home park around 4 p.m. and returning, but she was last seen walking away again. The key question is, where did she go that last time, and where is she now? The investigation is ongoing, and police urge anyone with information to contact Tracy authorities. Everyone searched for her, but no signs of her were found. Later, detectives examined the security camera footage installed by Sandra's grandfather. The recording showed Sandra leaving her house, heading to the park to play. When she returned, she seemed happy, skipping back home at 4 p.m. But instead of going inside, she suddenly turned and walked down the street towards one of the exits. The footage stopped at this point, leaving her next steps a mystery. This unexpected behavior was concerning, as Sandra usually followed safety rules about not leaving with strangers. The police suspected that someone or something familiar to her might have caught her attention. The investigators' initial suspect was Sandra's father, Daniel, due to his prolonged absence from her life, which was revealed during the police investigation. Additionally, they discovered that Daniel and Maria were engaged in a financial dispute related to custody issues. However, Maria assured the detective that despite their marital problems, Daniel would never be involved in Sandra's disappearance. According to Maria, Sandra had a strong bond with her father, and they got along well. The media later interviewed Daniel about his missing child. When asked for a statement, Daniel recounted receiving a call from his sister on Friday, informing him that Sandra was missing. He rushed to the scene and waited for a day before returning to work. Daniel stressed that the purpose of the interview was to shift the attention away from himself and onto the potential perpetrator, if there was one. He urged the detective to do their job to the best of their ability, emphasizing the need to focus on finding the real person behind Sandra's disappearance. A week after Sandra Cantu's disappearance, the 8-year-old girl's whereabouts remained unknown. In Tracy, authorities were pursuing hundreds of leads and increasing the reward for information about her. Investigators were combing through trash at the local landfill, searching nearby rivers, and looking into suspicious individuals, including residents of the mobile park and those seen in the area on March 27th. These individuals included an unknown ice cream vendor who had interacted with children in the neighborhood that day, and Frank Waller, a neighbor of the Cantu family who was rumored to be a pedophile. Frank had previously admitted to kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier, claiming it was a friendly gesture. Despite the disturbing nature of his admission, the authorities ultimately cleared him as a suspect, though they made it clear they would keep a close eye on him. Meanwhile, the search for the real perpetrator continued, and the community rallied around Maria, showing her support and love during this tough period. At 8:30 p.m., neighbor Melissa discovered a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox just miles from Sandra's family. It read, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase thrown in water on Boucher Road and Whitehall Road." The note had obvious spelling mistakes, sparking questions. Was it real or meant to confuse the investigation? Melissa told FBI agents she didn't notice anyone or anything unusual when she found the note. She let them search her car, where they found a post-it note in the glove box with scribbled out words. The note was sent to experts for analysis. Following this discovery, they chose to release Melissa and shift their attention back to analyzing the original note found near the mailbox. Weeks went by, but authorities could not find any traces of Sandra. After 10 long days of searching for Sandra, her case took a shocking turn. The police chief told us that the person or persons responsible for the death of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu would be brought to justice. Sandra's death has devastated the community. Jose Luis Franco, a farm worker, found a locked black suitcase while draining a pond. The weight of the case sparked dread, and their fears were realized. Inside, Sandra's lifeless body was curled up, dressed in black leggings and a Hello Kitty shirt, with many cuts and wounds. A torn cloth was tied around her head, covered in blood, evoking shock and sorrow. Sandra's body was sent to undergo an autopsy to gather more information about her death. The results of the autopsy were devastating and added to the shock and horror surrounding her death. The autopsy revealed disturbing details. Sandra had been brutally assaulted, but there was no sign of any biological fluids. The injuries suggested that an unknown object had been used, and the cause of her death was asphyxiation. Furthermore, the coroner found a large amount of alprazolam in her system, indicating that she had been drugged. The official cause of death was recorded as homicide by asphyxiation. Sadly, it was discovered that she was murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, a terrifying fact that sent shockwaves through the community. The description of the neighbor matched a woman named Melissa Huck. Investigators checked the CCTV camera at Sandra's house and confirmed that Melissa owned the same type of car. The footage showed Melissa getting into her SUV from a parking spot directly across the street from her house around 3:30 p.m. She drove towards her residence, which was located to the left of Sandra's house. Later, Melissa visited her grandparents' church before being seen by a resident near the pond at approximately 5:30 p.m. This timeline was surprising, as it established that Melissa was in the area around the time Sandra disappeared. The police had identified a prime suspect in the case, Melissa. They strongly believed she was the perpetrator and wanted to question her. However, when they approached her, they discovered that she had attempted to take her own life by swallowing razor blades. As a result, Melissa was hospitalized, and the police were forced to wait until she recovered before they could interrogate her. Once she was well enough, Melissa claimed to have no knowledge of the events surrounding the case and maintained that her only involvement was bringing the note to their attention. She told the officers that at 4 p.m. on the day Sandra was last seen, she had been at her church, decorating her classroom, and had not seen anything unusual in the area. The police unsurprisingly asked Melissa to confirm her alibi, which her phone records ultimately supported as crucial evidence. It turned out that Melissa had earlier called the police herself to report the theft of her suitcase from her driveway. She explained that after learning about Sandra's disappearance, she had even sent Maria a text message telling the police she had been robbed around 4 p.m., although she wasn't sure if that detail was significant. The stolen suitcase proved to be a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. The black Eddie Bauer suitcase containing Sandra was identical to the one Melissa had reported stolen, which added to its significance. The note Melissa found not only mentioned a suitcase, but specifically referred to a stolen one. Although the authorities had gathered substantial evidence implicating Melissa, they sought additional information. They decided to wiretap her phone and waited patiently for her release from the hospital. 2 days later, when Melissa was discharged from the hospital, the police were stunned to discover that she had called the Canto family. During their conversation, Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home to play with her supposedly 5-year-old daughter. Responding to her residence immediately, the officers found no children inside, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another young victim into her house. A second neighbor has come forward with a disturbing revelation. Just before Sandra's disappearance, Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl from the neighborhood to the park without her parents' permission. When the child returned, she was disoriented, slurred her speech, and had trouble walking. Her parents took her to the hospital, where tests revealed she had been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. Although Melissa denied giving the girl drugs, the incident raised suspicions. As the investigation continued, the police grew increasingly suspicious of Melissa. They were shocked to learn about the drugged child. Soon after, they obtained a warrant to search Melissa's trailer and her grandparents' church. During the trailer search, they found a notebook with handwriting that exactly matched the note Melissa had claimed to have found on the ground. This discovery provided a crucial link between Melissa and the note, leaving the police stunned. Later, experts analyzing the post-it note found in Melissa's car's glove box made a stunning revelation. The note featured cryptic words, including Bache Road, Whitehall Road, and water, which added a mysterious layer to the ongoing investigation. Furthermore, they discovered alprazolam in Melissa's purse, a drug prescribed to her, which matched the substance found in Sandra's body. During the 2009 search of Clover Road Baptist Church, a blood-stained rolling pin was found with Sandra's DNA. A draw cord was missing from a window blind, and the cord used on the Eddie Bow suitcase matched the remaining church blinds. Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher, was arrested on April 10, 2009. Initially, she denied involvement, but later confessed, stating Sandra's death was an accident. She persuaded Sandra to enter a suitcase for a game with her daughter, and later found her lifeless body. Melissa claimed that she had played a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra, suggesting that Sandra hide in a suitcase and then jump out to surprise her own daughter and sister. Sandra allegedly agreed to the plan and zipped herself inside the suitcase. Melissa then said that she had forgotten Sandra was inside and didn't remember until she arrived at a church, where she opened the case to find Sandra unresponsive. In a panic, Melissa attempted to perform CPR and used a small wet towel to cool Sandra's forehead, but admitted she didn't know how to handle the situation. Later, Melissa got rid of the suitcase containing Sandra's body in a nearby pond. However, the investigators found that Melissa was not telling the truth when they looked into her personal life and discovered a history of criminal activity, depression, and other mental health issues. Melissa's legal history was well documented, and court records revealed that she pleaded no contest to felony second-degree commercial burglary and misdemeanor property theft charges on January 9th. A criminal complaint highlighted her prior convictions, including a 2006 property theft conviction that resulted in jail time in Los Angeles County. In November 2008, she was accused of attempting to steal from a store while on probation in San Juan County and had a scheduled court date. Melissa had also filed for bankruptcy in 2003, citing credit card debt and medical expenses. Melissa's father said she struggled with depression and finding her path after college. Her ex-husband confirmed her depression and self-image issues, but described her as carefree. They married in 2003, separated in 2004, and divorced in 2005, with Melissa getting full custody of their 5-year-old daughter. John Huckabee was shocked when he learned that his ex-wife Melissa was involved in the murder of a young girl. He couldn't believe it, saying it's not something you want to think anyone is capable of, especially someone you know and who is the mother of your child. After they separated, Melissa moved to Southern California to live with her parents, which made it difficult for John to see his daughter. During a past custody battle, Melissa had made accusations against John, claiming he was guilty of alcohol abuse and domestic violence, which he strongly denied. John, who had lost touch with Melissa for over 3 years, was now seeking custody of their daughter. He had started a new family, remarrying and having 2 more children. However, the idea of Melissa being involved in the rape and murder of a child seemed impossible to comprehend. At trial, Melissa Huckabee showed emotion when the judge announced her crimes. Throughout, prosecutor Thomas Testa argued Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. He showed surveillance footage of Sandra heading to Melissa's house. Testa claimed Melissa drugged Sandra with juice at a church, then waited for her to pass out before attacking and suffocating her. The prosecutor, Thomas Testa, initially intended to push for the death penalty in the case against Melissa Huckabee because she had not admitted to the horrific crimes. But a turning point came during the trial when Melissa suddenly decided to plead guilty, accepting full responsibility for what she had done. During the trial, Judge Linda Loftus of San Juan County Superior Court questioned Melissa Huckabee to ensure she understood the consequences of pleading guilty. Judge Loftus asked Melissa if she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and if she was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa affirmed that she had and reiterated her decision to plead guilty. After completing her questioning, prosecutor Thomas Testa expressed concerns about Melissa's mental health. He highlighted her unusual behavior in prison, including a recent incident where she attempted to harm herself, which raised questions about her ability to make rational decisions. Testa noted that Melissa appeared coherent and rational in court, but he was worried about her mental state in the long run. Melissa Huckabee's guilty plea was a pivotal moment in the case. By admitting her guilt, she brought some closure to the Cantu family, saving them from a long and painful trial. This significant development altered the course of the court proceedings and paved the way for what would happen next in Sandra's case. Melissa's guilty plea simplified the process and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after all they had endured since Sandra's tragic death. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee received a life sentence without parole for the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. The motivations behind Sandra's tragic death remain unclear. Prosecutors believed Melissa planned the crime to harm Sandra intentionally. Despite this, Melissa never disclosed her reasons, leaving investigators baffled. However, documents revealed a troubled individual with a history of depression, self-harm, and a difficult past. Melissa is now serving her life sentence at Sand County Jail, burdened by the gravity of her actions. Her imprisonment serves as a reminder that severe crimes have severe consequences. For the Cantu family, the pain of losing Sandra will never fully subside, but they find comfort in knowing justice has been served. The trial and conviction brought a sense of closure, ensuring Sandra's tragic death did not go unpunished. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of April Tinsley. April Tinsley was born on March 18, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as the eldest child in her family. She attended elementary school and was involved in the local church's children's choir, but her true passion was socializing with friends, exploring the neighborhood, and simply enjoying herself. On Friday, April 1, 1988, 8-year-old April returned home from school early, eager to start her afternoon adventures. After lunch, she asked her mom if she could visit her friend Nicole, who lived just a few hundred yards away. Her mom consented, as she had many times before. Nicole's house was a short, familiar walk away, and their neighborhood was considered a safe haven. As April set off, her mom reminded her to call as soon as she arrived at the Coles house and handed her an umbrella, anticipating the impending rain. A few minutes later, April called her mom from the Coles house, and her mom instructed her to be back home by 4 p.m. However, when the appointed time came and went, April still hadn't returned. Her mom began to worry that she might get caught in the rain and called Nicole's house. Nicole's mom answered, saying that April and her daughter had gone to play at a nearby playground. While they were there, it started to rain, and April realized she had left her umbrella at Nicole's house. April told Nicole she would walk to her house, retrieve the umbrella, and then head home, as she had promised her mom. Nicole, on the other hand, decided to visit another friend's house, and the girls went their separate ways. However, when Nicole's mom informed April's mom that April never stopped by to get the umbrella, despite leaving the playground almost an hour ago, April's mom immediately grew concerned. She alerted her husband that their daughter was missing, and they set out to search for her. Several neighbors joined in upon hearing about April's disappearance, and together they combed all the streets connecting Nicole's house, the playground, and their home. But they found no sign of her. The parents then decided to contact the police. Officers arrived at the Tinleys' home, obtaining a photo and description of April, and promptly launched a search effort. Within hours, dozens of neighbors joined the search party, eager to help the family locate their daughter. The search area spanned several miles around April's usual route, but despite their efforts, no signs of her were found. As night descended, the police began to suspect that they were likely dealing with a kidnapping, reasoning that if April had simply gotten lost, she would have been located by now. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The next day, the search area was broadened, and news of April's disappearance swept through the city. Despite an influx of police and volunteers joining the effort, they still couldn't find her or any leads. This continued for 3 days until April 4th, when a jogger phoned 911, reporting a disturbing discovery. While running along a road about 20 meters from April's home, he had noticed something peculiar in a ditch. As he drew closer, he realized it was a human body. The police rushed to the scene and confirmed the worst. It was April Tinsley. She was fully clothed, except for one shoe. Officers couldn't find any obvious signs of trauma on her body, but they were almost certain she had been murdered. They theorized that an unknown perpetrator had killed her elsewhere, then brought her to this field and left her body in a ditch. Police also discovered an adult toy nearby, although they weren't sure if it was linked to the case. Later, they found April's second shoe lying on the other side of the road, a few hundred yards from her body. Medical experts determined that April's death was caused by asphyxiation, and she had also been sexually assaulted. They established that her death had occurred within the 48 hours preceding the discovery of her body, indicating that the perpetrator had held her captive for some time. Although forensic science and DNA analysis were still in their infancy, experts managed to collect evidence from the body. However, the lack of a DNA database at the time meant detectives had to rely on new leads. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long after the body was found. Investigators appealed to the public through the media, and numerous tips were received. Two tips, in particular, caught their attention. One individual contacted the police, reporting that he had driven past the field where April's body was found and noticed an old blue pickup truck parked on the side of the road. Investigators believed it could belong to the killer, and the witness might have seen it when the perpetrator dumped April's body in the ditch, making this lead even more valuable. A woman living along the route from the playground to Nicole's house reported seeing a girl resembling April on the day of her disappearance. According to the witness, as the girl walked along the road, an old blue pickup truck pulled up beside her, and, a few seconds later, it drove away with the girl on board. Although the car obstructed her view, the witness couldn't see exactly how the girl got inside. This tip became the first significant lead for investigators, who were also provided with a description of the driver: a white man around 30 years old with blonde or ginger hair. Based on this information, police created a sketch of the suspect and distributed it to the media, along with a description of his vehicle, hoping someone would recognize him. The FBI soon joined the investigation, and together with the police, they looked into the possible involvement of all men who had previously been convicted of sexual crimes living in April's area, seeking new leads. At some point, they were informed that the suspect's portrait resembled a man who had been involved in organized crime activities and had an interest in Satanism. Investigators checked on this individual, but couldn't establish his involvement. However, they arrested him for another offense unrelated to April's disappearance. Police continued to pursue leads and investigate numerous individuals, but they failed to make any significant breakthroughs. This stagnant state persisted for several months, and eventually, detectives hit a dead end. Notably, during the course of the investigation, police uncovered several other crimes against children and apprehended the perpetrators, but the individual responsible for April's murder remained at large. In the following years, the case saw no major advancements, but in May 1990, a sudden and unexpected twist emerged. A teenage boy living 10 miles from where April's body was discovered found a message on his shed, written from the perspective of the perpetrator. The killer confessed to April's murder, hinting at further crimes to come, and inquired about the status of the victim's second shoe. This prompted detectives to suspect that the author was likely April's killer rather than a prankster. The discovery was significant because the detail about the victim's shoe being found several hundred yards from her body had never been released to the media, making it unlikely that anyone but the killer would know this. Another fascinating aspect of the message was that it had initially been written in pencil and then traced over in marker. This led investigators to theorize that the perpetrator may have left the message months prior to its discovery and then returned to make it more conspicuous by outlining it in marker. Police decided to release photos of the cryptic message, hoping someone would recognize the handwriting, but unfortunately, it didn't yield any breakthroughs. Just a few months later, the residents of Wayne were left reeling by the shocking news that police had discovered the body of a 7-year-old girl in another part of the city. She had been sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was asphyxiation. Given the eerie parallels to April's case, police instinctively suspected that the same perpetrator was behind this heinous crime. However, FBI profilers disagreed, convinced that they were dealing with two separate offenders. Despite their efforts, no progress was made in either case until 1995, when police finally linked the second victim's murder to a family friend who had since passed away. As a result, the case was closed, and investigators ceased to consider it related to April's murder. Detectives waited for the perpetrator to make contact again, as his initial message suggested he reveled in mocking the police and flaunting his apparent impunity. However, as the years went by, no new messages surfaced. The case remained stagnant until 2004, when it took a dramatic turn. A Fort Wayne girl discovered a plastic zip bag in her bike basket containing a chilling note that left her shaken. She promptly showed it to her parents, who alerted the authorities. The note read, "Hello dear, I've been watching you. I'm the one who kidnapped, assaulted, and killed April Tensley. I have a gift for you. You'll be my next victim if you don't report this to the police, and I don't see this note in tomorrow's local news. I'll destroy your home, killing everyone but you. You'll be mine." The police had no doubt that the note's author was indeed April's killer. Inside the bag with the note was a used condom sent to the laboratory for analysis. By 2004, DNA profiling had become a routine tool, and experts had already extracted a profile from the semen found on April's body. Now the analysis revealed that the biological sample from the condom matched the same individual, but he was not in the FBI database. The police reopened April's case and soon received a report of a second note. Another girl had found a plastic bag containing a similar message, including a used condom with the same man's DNA. The perpetrator had written that he had killed April Tinsley and threatened to kill this girl as well. In the following months, the police received two more calls about similar notes found by other girls. This time, the perpetrator had attached Polaroid photos of his genitalia, which investigators examined for clues. Although all they noticed was a green pattern on the bedsheet in the background, they tried to locate stores selling similar bedding, but it didn't lead to a breakthrough. Within just a few months, the perpetrator had left a total of 4 notes, but then fell silent for years. Once again, in 2009, the FBI released a detailed profile of the killer, including witness-identified physical characteristics, but unfortunately, it yielded no leads. For Fort Wayne investigators, this case remained a top priority for several compelling reasons. Firstly, and most importantly, they were driven to achieve justice and bring the perpetrator who took April's life to account. The killer's audacity was further demonstrated by his taunting messages to the police, which suggested he believed he would never be caught, and his threats against other girls. In a brazen move, he left behind his DNA for detectives to find, providing them with numerous biological samples. However, despite the wealth of evidence, April's killer remained absent from the FBI's database over the years, indicating he had avoided serious criminal convictions and continued to live freely. In 2012, a popular television program about unsolved crimes featured April's case, generating a fresh wave of tips, but each one ultimately led to a dead end. In 2015, detectives reopened the investigation and turned to Parabon, a company that provided law enforcement agencies with a novel service, creating portraits of individuals based on their DNA samples. This innovative approach had already successfully solved several cases. Investigators shared the portrait of the suspect in April's case online and with the media, hoping someone would recognize the person. However, luck was not on their side, and they didn't receive any valuable leads, but the police remained determined. Years later, in 2018, they contacted Parabon again, this time to explore genetic genealogy, a pioneering approach. This method involves experts taking a DNA sample and scouring publicly available genetic databases for any relatives of the DNA owner, no matter how distant. They typically find thousands of people, then study their family trees to identify someone who matches the perpetrator's criteria, such as gender, age, location at the time of the crime, and more. The unique aspect of this method is that the DNA owner doesn't need to be in a database. they can be identified solely through a long chain of relatives. Detectives working on April's case sent the killer's DNA sample to Parabon once again, waiting patiently for the results. The process of tracing relatives and studying their family trees was a lengthy one, requiring experts to sift through vast amounts of data over several months. Eventually, they informed the detectives that they had traced the DNA lineage to two brothers living in Fort Wayne. Now, the police had to determine which of the brothers was the killer. They placed both men under surveillance, collecting their trash in the hopes of extracting DNA samples. It wasn't long before the experts called the detectives with the long-awaited news. 30 years after the murder, they had found a perfect match. The DNA taken from the victim's body and the condoms matched the DNA of one of the brothers, 59-year-old John Miller, who lived in the small town of Grail, not far from where April's body was found. At the time of the murder, he was 29 years old and resided in the same trailer. The police decided to obtain a direct DNA sample from Miller and interrogate him. When they arrived at his trailer and asked him to accompany them to the station, he astutely guessed they were there about April Tinsley. On the way to the station, Miller engaged in small talk, appearing remarkably relaxed. At the interrogation, Miller neither denied nor contested the allegations and confessed to abducting, sexually assaulting, and murdering April. He claimed to have deliberately targeted Fort Wayne, spotting April on a deserted street and telling her to get into his car, to which she silently acquiesced. He then took her to his trailer, where he assaulted and killed her before dumping her body. Miller's lawyer advised him to plead not guilty to protract the legal process. However, he was offered a deal. In exchange for admitting guilt, the death penalty would be commuted to an 80-year prison sentence. Miller accepted the deal, admitted his guilt, and received the 80-year sentence. April's mother was disappointed that Miller escaped the death penalty, but given his advanced age, it is unlikely he will ever be released. April's father, on the other hand, thanked the investigators for their tireless efforts in finding his daughter's killer. The detectives believe Miller had a motive for wanting to be caught. He deliberately courted attention, taking risks such as leaving DNA samples at the crime scene. They suspect he was either prepared to be found out or actively sought it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959 in Houston, Texas, and grew up in a loving family where she was especially close to her sister. In high school, she met Mike, and a few years later, they tied the knot. The couple settled in a quiet Houston suburb where they soon started a family with the birth of their daughter. 3 years later, Kathy became pregnant again, and in early 1987, they welcomed a son. At just 27 years old, Kathy was now a mother of two. After her second child was born, Kathy dedicated herself to full-time motherhood, focusing on raising her children. Mike worked at his father-in-law's small sign factory, providing a stable income for the family. Kathy's parents also offered financial support, enabling her to devote all her time to the kids. On March 3, 1987, Kathy was at home with the children as usual, while Mike was at work. After his shift ended, he decided to meet up with friends and headed to a bar. Mike attempted to call his wife from a payphone, but she didn't answer, a rare occurrence, as Kathy rarely had the chance to leave the house even for a few minutes. Mike tried calling her several more times, but still got no response. Worried, Mike called their neighbor, Tim, and asked him to check on Kathy. Tim went to their house and knocked on the door, but received no answer. Peering through the living room window, he noticed the TV was on, so he persisted in knocking, but there was only silence. Tim's concern grew that something might have happened to Kathy. Rather than returning home to call Mike or the police, he got in his car and drove around town searching for patrol officers. After a few minutes of driving, he spotted a police car and explained the situation to the officers, requesting they check on Kathy. When the police arrived at the house and received no response to their knock, they tried the door handle and found it unlocked. Upon entering the house, they immediately found Kathy's daughter lying on the living room sofa, unconscious and displaying visible signs of trauma, but still alive. The officers quickly called for an ambulance and continued to inspect the other rooms. In the bedroom, the officers found the younger child in his crib, safe and unharmed. However, in another room, they were met with a gruesome scene. Kathy lay on the floor, bloodied and lifeless. She was naked, and the police quickly determined that she was the victim of a heinous crime. Her hands were bound with a lamp cord, a disturbing indicator of the brutality she had endured. The paramedics rushed Kathy's daughter to the hospital, and the investigators began meticulously examining the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived shortly after, but the police withheld the details of the tragedy from him. Instead, they requested that he go to the hospital to be with his granddaughter when she awoke. As Kathy's father waited at the hospital, he was shocked to learn about his daughter's murder from a news report on TV. Meanwhile, Mike arrived at the house, and the police were immediately struck by his suspicious behavior. Not only did he show up late, but there were also telltale bloodstains on his shirt. The police asked him to surrender his clothes and answer their questions, their scrutiny intensifying with each passing moment. Investigators made several intriguing discoveries. Firstly, they found numerous bloodstains in the bathroom, indicating that the perpetrator had attempted to clean up the crime scene. This suggested that the attacker had lingered in the house for some time rather than fleeing immediately after the murder. Secondly, forensic experts detected no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors, except the front door, were locked, implying that Kathy either let the attacker in voluntarily or they had a key. The police also observed another peculiar detail. All of Kathy's clothes were neatly folded on the floor beside her body. This not only hinted at the possibility of sexual assault, but also seemed strange that the attacker had taken the time to fold her clothes with such care. The detectives hypothesized that the assailant might have threatened to harm her children if she screamed or refused to comply with their demands. Kathy may have acquiesced to their demands solely to protect her children, only to be killed afterwards. Kathy's daughter was fighting for her life after being brutally beaten, likely with bare hands. After several hours in the hospital, she fell into a coma, and her chances of survival remained dire. Medical experts examined Kathy's body and determined that she had suffered 16 stab wounds, primarily in the abdominal area. They also confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted and managed to extract biological material from the perpetrator. However, during that time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science, so the experts could only determine the perpetrator's blood type. From the early hours of the investigation, the police zeroed in on the victim's husband, Mike, after noticing suspicious stains on his shirt. They seized his clothing for examination, and Mike's behavior that evening also raised eyebrows. After work, he went out with friends, but instead of going home, he asked a neighbor, Tim, to check on his wife, a tactic detectives had seen before, where a husband committed the murder and created an alibi. The police also uncovered that Mike had a checkered past. Right after high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover cop and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, although he only served 2 before being released on parole. Later, he married Kathy, but the police needed more evidence to charge him. The detectives also launched an investigation into Tim, the neighbor, whose behavior seemed suspicious. Rather than calling the police from his home, he drove around town searching for patrol officers. A search of Tim's car revealed suspicious stains on the floor mats that resembled blood. Forensic experts determined that Kathy's death had occurred around 10 p.m., approximately 6 hours before her body was discovered. This led the detectives to probe the suspect's whereabouts long before the evening and their actions after the murder. Both Mike and Tim claimed to have been at work, prompting the police to verify their alibis. 2 days after the murder, The hospital contacted the detectives with a breakthrough. Kathy's daughter had suddenly regained consciousness, and her life was no longer in danger. Investigators rushed to interview her, hoping she could provide insight into the events, but the 4-year-old girl had almost completely lost her memory of that day. She vaguely recalled a man with light hair entering their house, though both her father and Tim had dark hair. The detectives received an unexpected update from the lab, forcing them to reassess the case. The experts' analysis revealed that the stains on the neighbor's car mats were mere machine oil, and those on the husband's shirt were just paint. Furthermore, multiple colleagues of Mike and Tim, who worked in different fields, corroborated that the two men had been at their workplaces all day and hadn't left until evening. This eliminated both men as suspects, as they hadn't had the opportunity to commit the crime at Kathy's house. The police, who had been convinced of one of the suspects' involvement, found themselves back at the starting point. They refocused on other potential suspects familiar with the victim and capable of entering her house without raising suspicions. As detectives questioned Kathy's relatives and friends, asking who they thought might be responsible, they discovered an intriguing pattern. Many of them, without hesitation, named one person: Greg. Greg, Kathy's brother-in-law, was flagged as a suspect due to his troublesome behavior, which her loved ones revealed she had frequently complained about. According to Kathy, Greg would openly flirt with her and persistently try to persuade her into intimate encounters. Moreover, he would often make inappropriate remarks about her stomach, a detail that aligned with the majority of stab wounds being located in that area. The police investigation uncovered Greg's history of illegal substance abuse and criminal past, prompting detectives to focus on him. They soon found a promising lead: a fingerprint and hair at Kathy's house matching Greg's. However, this evidence was not conclusive, as Greg regularly visited Kathy and her husband, potentially leaving behind the prints and hair prior to the murder. Kathy's parents were convinced of Greg's guilt. Her mother shared a telling anecdote. During a late-night hospital visit with her granddaughter, Greg appeared, causing the girl to glance at her grandmother with an unmistakable look of fear. After hearing this testimony, the detectives summoned Greg for questioning. He categorically denied any involvement in the murder, claiming to have been with a friend at the time, a friend with a notable criminal record. Mid-interrogation, Greg requested a brief absence to pay for additional parking time, allegedly to avoid a ticket, but he never returned to the station. Greg's wife's sister later recounted that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at work around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m., leaving him a 4-hour window that coincided with the time of the murder, providing a plausible opportunity to kill Kathy. Despite these suspicious circumstances, the police still lacked concrete evidence to link Greg to the crime. As a last resort, they decided to analyze the semen sample taken from the victim's body. At the time, forensic experts could only determine the blood type of the sample's owner. The blood type of the sample from Kathy's body matched Greg's, but this finding did not conclusively prove his guilt. Investigators were unable to make an arrest based on the available evidence, prompting a continued search for additional proof. However, despite their efforts, they were ultimately unable to prove Greg's involvement. The case eventually stalled, leaving Kathy's family frustrated and convinced of Greg's guilt, yet powerless to act. Meanwhile, Shelley, Kathy's sister, refused to accept that her husband was capable of such a heinous crime and chose to continue living with him in the years that followed. Detectives revisited the case in 1998, 11 years after the murder, seeking DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, they only got a partial DNA profile, which showed Greg belonged to the 2% of the population matching it. When questioned, Greg changed his story, claiming a consensual relationship with Kathy, but detectives were skeptical, knowing such shifts are common in murder cases. Despite suspicions, they couldn't convict without a full DNA match, and the case went cold again. In 2002, Detectives revived the investigation, enlisting the expertise of forensic scientist Catherine Long, a pioneer in DNA research. She and her team aimed to determine whether a perpetrator's DNA could linger on the victim's body after strangulation, and if so, whether it could be extracted for analysis. To test this theory, Catherine and her colleagues simulated strangulation, squeezing each other's necks, and then collected samples from their hands and the neck area. The results were striking. Even brief contact left behind sufficient skin particles for DNA analysis. Detectives re-examined Kathy's case, focusing on the lamp cord used to bind her hands. Since only the killer could have tightened it, they handed it over to Catherine for DNA analysis. Stored in a paper bag, the cord was swabbed from end to end, including blood-stained areas. 2 DNA profiles emerged, Kathy's and Greg's, providing strong evidence that Greg was the killer. 15 years after the murder, the suspect was arrested and denied involvement, claiming a romantic relationship with Kathy. However, DNA evidence led to his trial. While in prison, his cellmate reported that Greg confessed to the crime, boasting about killing Kathy after she resisted his advances and threatening to harm her son if she didn't comply. The detectives were convinced of the cellmate's veracity, given that he couldn't have possibly divined so many crucial details, even if he had carefully read about the case in the news. Empowered by the cellmate's testimony, the detectives confronted Greg, and this time, he finally broke down and confessed. He acknowledged his guilt in Kathy's murder, repeating the same admission he had made to his cellmate. Subsequently, he pleaded guilty in court and was handed a 45-year prison sentence, though he ultimately served only 4 years before succumbing to liver cancer at the age of 56. Kathy's husband, Mike, tragically didn't live to see the day of the killer's arrest, passing away at the age of 45. Her children and parents expressed gratitude to the detectives for finally bringing the case to a close, albeit 15 years later. Throughout that long and arduous wait, they had been almost certain that Greg was the perpetrator, yet they were forced to watch him continue living with their second daughter, powerless to intervene. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxanne Valdez. Roxanne Valdez was born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name remains undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for, as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables, and even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and didn't engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school where she worked. As a single mother, she spent her days working in the fields, leaving her little time to devote to her son. At the school, Claudio Muñoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His night shifts often brought him into contact with Roxana, despite their 14-year age difference. They discovered common interests and bonded over their personal struggles. Roxana shared stories about the school and her failed marriage, while Claudio confided in her about his unhappy relationship with his wife and his adoration for his 2 daughters. Though he felt disconnected from his wife and had considered divorce, he remained in the marriage to honor a promise to his late father-in-law. Over time, Claudio's priorities shifted, and he began spending more time with Roxana, eventually leaving his family without explanation. Roxana welcomed him into her life, and their relationship accelerated rapidly. However, in her haste, she overlooked the fact that Claudio was temperamental and sometimes cruel, as well as the needs of her own children, who required constant attention. On a scheduled community cleanup day, At the boarding school, Claudio's first serious outburst of aggression occurred. Students were assigned different areas to clean and were given the necessary supplies, including brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags. However, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio, who was in charge of cleanliness but lacked teaching experience. In the absence of teachers, he threatened to physically harm any student who didn't clean. Although it's unclear if he would have carried out this threat, the students eventually began cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of violence, which displeased the principal. As a result, the principal asked Claudio to resign voluntarily. It's worth noting that the Don Gregorio boarding school was almost the only place in the area that offered stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio initially spent some time searching for work in fields and at fruit stalls, but when his efforts proved unsuccessful, he and Roxana decided to seek a better life elsewhere. They left her son at the boarding school to continue his education, as they deemed it too risky to take him with them, fearing they would become too dependent on employers. Having already had a bad experience, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They relocated to the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital, which is renowned for its vineyards that produce well-known wine brands exported globally. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and took their first steps in their small family business. Claudio was responsible for purchasing and transporting products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as this would have meant additional expenses. And they were also concerned that an employee might not closely monitor the perishable goods, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxana was pregnant with their first child together. He needed time to reflect on this, but Roxana, blinded by her new relationship and their thriving business, didn't disagree with his point of view. She agreed that after the child was born, they would give it to her relatives to raise. However, it turned out that there was no child to give away. Since then, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. He frequently yelled at his wife and occasionally resorted to physical violence. The neighbors, unhappy with the noisy disputes, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, the police responded to a distress call to find Roxana in a distraught state, crying and partially undressed, as she fled her home with Claudio chasing after her. When the officers arrived, Roxana broke down and confided in them, revealing that she had been a victim of ongoing domestic abuse, which had even led to her suffering a miscarriage. This traumatic experience had left her requiring psychological help. Nevertheless, as time passed, the couple appeared to put the incident behind them, and they resumed their life together as if the ordeal had never occurred. Despite the incident warranting criminal charges, Roxana showed compassion and gave Claudio a second chance, extracting a promise that it was an isolated incident. Claudio vowed to never again exhibit such behavior, but his history of abuse with his ex-wife cast doubt on his reliability. Sadly, the pattern of abuse persisted, and history repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but started going out at night to drink excessively in local bars. He would spend a significant portion of their family's income not only on alcohol, but also on relationships with disreputable women. Roxana tolerated her husband's behavior, hoping that he would change once they had a child together. Her hope was partially fulfilled. In 2013, Roxana gave birth to a healthy child, and Claudio ended his partying lifestyle, diverting his attention to their business, which required expansion. They acquired another kiosk in a nearby area and an additional vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as their work and living environments were not very safe. The family's wealth grew substantially, but it was only on paper. Despite this, Claudio went back to his old habits, wasting money on drinking and once again resorting to violence against Roxana at home. According to Roxana's testimony, the abuse she suffered at Claudio's hands continually worsened over time. At first, Claudio only drank occasionally, but he soon began to do so more and more frequently. When he came home drunk, he would accuse Roxana of being unfaithful, even though she was innocent, and this would lead to physical and sexual abuse, even when she was pregnant. Claudio's actions seemed intentionally designed to cause harm, and they ultimately led to Roxana having a miscarriage in August 2012, which sent her into a deep and prolonged depression. Claudio followed his usual routine by visiting a local bar one night, staying out until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still worried about him. However, it turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, from their daughter's room. The money, earned from selling Roxana's mother's house, was intended for their joint business venture. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed by Claudio's actions, which he used to fund his excessive drinking and brothel visits. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. Instead of discussing the issue, Claudio assaulted her and confessed to squandering the entire amount. This was the final straw for Roxana, who, without hesitation, went to their bedroom, retrieved a .38 caliber revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest at close range. The shot proved fatal, and Claudio died instantly. Roxana was taken aback by her own drastic actions and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. Her desperate act marked a tragic end to the ongoing turmoil in their domestic life. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that her intention was to kill Claudio, not intimidate him, citing the numerous instances of abuse and assault she had suffered at his hands. Roxana regretted not reporting these incidents to the authorities or withdrawing her complaint out of fear, even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's primary concern was the potential impact on their young daughter, particularly if she were imprisoned and the child were sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided the best course of action would be to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing. Aware that his frequent drinking binges that often led to his disappearance were well known to the police. Roxana found disposing of the body a daunting task. She decided to dismember it piece by piece, initially using 5 kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head as they kept dulling. She then boiled the dismembered parts in her largest pots, all while interacting with her young daughter, who remained oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. The following day, Roxana packed the cooled body parts into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a separate garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia, intending to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, upon arriving at the designated site, Roxana couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. In her testimony, Roxana expressed her internal conflict, stating that it was strange she had the bravery to commit the heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were an animal. But she couldn't bring herself to dispose of the evidence. She mentioned being nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing the police would stop and search her car at any moment. This fear led to panic, even though she had a backup plan involving her daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. She even thought of how to make her cry louder by pinching her. Roxana was unable to get rid of the remains, so she took them back home and hid them in the garage. She then thoroughly cleaned the interior of her car with bleach. Next, she visited Claudio's relatives, telling them that he had stolen a large amount of money and had been absent for days. They didn't seem to care, simply shrugging in response. After that, Roxana visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely concerned about Roxana's behavior, noticing that she hadn't eaten, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions over and over. The only question Roxana answered quickly was when her mother asked about Claudio's whereabouts, saying that he had gone to buy supplies for their store, but had gotten a flat tire and was delayed getting back home. Alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything, sharing the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, and showed him the containers holding the body. Her brother was shocked, but instead of offering help, he refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged Roxana to confess to the Carabineros, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxana decided to take his advice. That night, she went to the 4th police station, announcing her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her husband's troublesome behavior, initially thought she wanted to report him again. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxana was immediately arrested, and the news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting a swarm of journalists around the station. The case against Roxana seemed clear-cut. She had confessed to the crime, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. However, prosecutor Monica Besis was not convinced. She was skeptical about the ease with which Roxana had confessed and wanted to investigate further. Besis requested an extension of Roxana's arrest to conduct a forensic examination, hoping to prove that her victim, Claudio, was still alive when she dismembered him. This would have significantly increased Roxana's sentence. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's defense attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana had acted while under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She pointed out that Roxana's cooperation and voluntary confession should be considered mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during the dismemberment was later disproven by forensic results, which confirmed that Claudio had died from a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver had caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs. Following these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. In a separate development, lawyer Juan Pablo Cardenas, who was seeking to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, noted that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also pointed out that Roxana's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela submitted documents to the court after a medical examination stating that Roxana was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. According to his findings, she lacked full awareness of her actions and suffered from emotional instability, which was linked to the recent loss of 2 children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Prosecutors' forensic exam showed Claudio's blood alcohol level was 3 Gr/L at death on April 17, 2015. After a year of investigation, Roxana's trial began. The media dubbed it the Molina Cooks case and sensationalized it, claiming Roxana ate part of the remains to attract attention. Distressed, Roxana refused to make statements during the trial. The prosecutors attempted to sway the judge's opinion by highlighting that, according to Chilean law, Roxana had committed a serious offense, the murder of her own father, patricide, although they failed to provide evidence that the crime was premeditated. In contrast, the defense attorney countered that his client had acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a violent aggressor who had subjected her to years of abuse and mistreatment. The trial, which lasted several weeks, was closely followed by the entire population of Chile. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for Roxana, but after careful consideration of the defense and the jury's opinion, the judges sentenced her to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who had been hoping for a life sentence or even the death penalty, were outraged when they heard the prosecutor's request for only 15 years. They were devastated by the court's decision and rejected any suggestion of violence within the family. They argued that Claudio, a successful businessman, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana, and claimed that he had confessed to them that Roxana had often threatened to kill him, having previously taken out a revolver from the closet and warned him of her intentions. Claudio's sister blamed Chile's system of justice, claiming it to be corrupt, as evidenced by the short sentences given to brutal criminals, similar to those for minor robberies. Claudio's first wife, Giselle, defended him, asserting that he was not violent, based on her experience of living with him for many years without incident. In contrast, Roxana was prone to jealous outbursts and possessiveness, often sparking disputes. Roxana's sentence was shortened due to good behavior, and she was transferred to a semi-open education center, where she was allowed to communicate with her daughter. Eventually, she was released early, sparking widespread outrage among the public, who felt that the cook from Molina was let off lightly. However, some people saw Roxana as a victim and justified her actions, despite considering her a murderer. This case continues to be debated in the country, highlighting the severe consequences of unchecked domestic violence. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings, with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of 2, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised, but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1st, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend JN were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, JN forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The 4 of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kennison brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kennison was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend against Dr. Burchard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alana Frick. Alana Christine Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, to Croatian immigrants, George and Anafi. She was the younger of 2 daughters, and her birth was seen as a miracle by her parents, who had been told by doctors that they would not be able to conceive again after her older sister, Caroline. Alana was very close to her sister from an early age and was raised with strong values of hard work and education. Her parents worked tirelessly at a large car factory to provide for their daughters and instill in them a love of learning. Both sisters excelled in school, but Alana stood out for her determination and passion for learning, spending all her free time reading and pursuing extracurricular activities like dance, gymnastics, and track and field. During her summer breaks, Alana worked in cornfields to help her family and learned to budget wisely. She excelled in math and science, and by high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. She graduated as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university without issue. It was during high school that Alana began dating Matthew Ryan, who was also studying medicine. Their romance lasted throughout their university days, but after graduation, Alana decided to continue her studies in Ottawa's university residency program, while Matthew settled for a job at a local hospital. Despite the distance, Alana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002, during which time they even planned to marry. However, they eventually decided to remain friends. By then, Alana was interning at one of the country's top clinics and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had stalled. In February 2003, Alana experienced love at first sight while working a night shift at the hospital. She walked into the staff room and noticed a new colleague, Mohammed Shamji, who instantly captured her attention. Mohammed was a year older than Alana and a resident in the neurosurgery department. Coming from an esteemed family of medical professionals, Mohammed was born and raised in Ottawa. His father, Farid Shamji, was a distinguished surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a skilled psychiatrist. His older brother, Ali, was a seasoned medical biophysicist, and both brothers had graduated from Yale University. Muhammad later returned to Canada to earn his doctorate from the University of Western Ontario. Although Muhammad initially showed no interest in approaching Alana, she was drawn to him and attempted to catch his eye. Eventually, Muhammad asked his colleagues for her phone number, sent her a message, and their romance began to flourish. Alana thought Muhammad was shy and introverted because he rarely initiated conversations, felt uneasy on dates, and would suddenly change topics or become silent. However, it was later revealed that his distant behavior wasn't due to shyness, but rather a lack of interest, as he was already secretly dating another woman. When Alana found out about the other woman, she became determined to win Muhammad over and become his sole partner. Their relationship was tumultuous during the first year, with 3 breakups and reconnections, mainly due to Alana's persistence. Despite her parents' advice to leave Muhammad, Alana remained committed, believing she had found her true love. Alana showered Muhammad with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only occasionally reciprocated her efforts. Meanwhile, Muhammad seemed to simply accept her affections, reciprocating only infrequently, creating an unbalanced dynamic in their relationship. In the summer of 2004, Alana discovered she was unexpectedly pregnant, which caused anxiety for both her and her partner. Despite their surprise, Muhammad, who was raised in a traditional Muslim country, felt pressured to marry Alana before their child was born, following cultural customs. The couple had 2 wedding ceremonies in early September 2004, one that respected Muhammad's family's cultural traditions and another with friends at a trendy restaurant complex. Although they appeared happy and in love, their marriage marked the beginning of a difficult period that would ultimately end in tragedy. In January 2005, they moved into a spacious house in an upscale Ottawa neighborhood and welcomed their daughter, Yasmin Ina. However, the birth of their daughter did not improve their marriage. Muhammad prioritized his career and education, neglecting his wife and newborn daughter. Moreover, he openly expressed his disappointment at not having a son. After having her baby, Alana took maternity leave to care for her child and manage the household. However, this led to tension with her husband, who would come home from work and isolate himself in his office, hardly spending time with Alana and their daughter. As time passed, he grew increasingly anxious, irritable, and critical, often belittling Alana's appearance, refusing her cooking, and even calling her stupid and useless. Despite her struggles, Alana kept her family problems private, not even sharing them with close friends or her parents. However, one day, while talking to her mother on the phone, her husband came home in a bad mood and began insulting Alana, which her mother overheard. Her mother tried to defend her, but her son-in-law shifted the blame to Alana, claiming she was responsible for their failing marriage. Alana's mother advised her to file for divorce and leave the abusive relationship, but Alana refused, insisting that she loved her husband and could handle the situation herself. Alana remained silent about Muhammad's physical abuse because the verbal abuse had become routine for him. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2005 when Muhammad, in a fit of rage, punched Alana in the face, breaking her nose. Alana, holding her baby, fled to friends and reported the domestic violence to the police. She also decided to divorce Muhammad and leave him for good. Surprisingly, Muhammad began pleading with Alana to return, promising to never hit her again, raise his voice, or engage in any form of abuse. He claimed he would change and make their family life perfect, controlling his emotions. While Muhammad appeared genuinely remorseful, his actions were motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to enroll at Duke University to pursue his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would jeopardize his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he managed to convince Alana to drop the charges and file for divorce. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would continue his studies and earn a degree. After a period of turmoil, Muhammad and Alana's family life became more stable. Muhammad was accepted into a competitive biomed engineering program, a significant achievement. Alana, meanwhile, enrolled in a master's program at Duke University, where she received a scholarship to cover her tuition. As a result, the couple had more time for each other, and their relationship became more solid. They decided to have another child, and in August 2007, their daughter Fisa was born. Although Muhammad had hoped for a son, the family was generally happy. In the summer of 2009, the family returned to Canada, settling back into their Ottawa home. Alana quickly returned to work as a family doctor at a prestigious hospital, earning a good reputation. Muhammad juggled his work, studies, and university teaching responsibilities. Around the same time, social media was becoming popular, and the couple started a personal blog that presented an idealized image of their family life. Behind their perfect facade, Muhammad and Alana's relationship was troubled. He controlled every aspect of her life, dictating who she could see, what she wore, and even monitoring her online activities. He would openly criticize her appearance, style, and parenting, but Alana chose to remain silent and tolerant of his behavior. As time passed, Muhammad's aggression and yelling increased, always blaming Alana for their arguments and problems. In 2011, he was offered a prestigious fellowship in spinal surgery in Calgary, which he accepted. However, he moved without his family, leaving them behind in Ottawa, and they were forced to maintain a long-distance relationship for over a year. During a visit home, Muhammad left his laptop on, and Alana discovered a message on his social media from a woman, implying a romantic involvement. When Alana confronted him directly, he admitted to having an affair and didn't deny it. This revelation was a devastating blow to Alana, and she considered divorcing her husband again. Her family thought she wouldn't forgive him this time, but surprisingly, Alana gave her family another chance. Muhammad promised to end the affair and start fresh in Toronto, where he had received a prestigious job offer. Muhammad and Alana had a third child, Marius, in 2013, hoping to strengthen their family. However, Muhammad's behavior towards Alana didn't change, and he continued to focus on his medical career, becoming a respected neurosurgeon. Alana also advanced in her career, but tension between them grew. During a family ski vacation, Muhammad's abuse resumed, leaving Alana with a deep cut on her arm that required stitches. Initially, she claimed it was a skiing accident, but later confided in her friend that it was from an argument over another affair. Alana overheard a private phone call between her husband, Muhammad, and his mistress. When she confronted him about it, he physically abused her. A friend advised Alana to divorce Muhammad, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Alana have an affair to get revenge, and although they laughed, Alana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her cheating husband. The summer of 2016 was difficult. While their older kids were at camp, Alana's youngest child stayed with her parents. During this time, the couple's relationship deteriorated. In early September, they celebrated their 12th anniversary on social media, but just a week later, they discussed getting a divorce. Muhammad refused, stating he was content, while Alana felt desperate. She started an affair with a colleague who had shown interest in her. Alana found solace in this new relationship, enjoying the care, attention, and feeling loved again. She became so enthralled that she might have considered leaving her children behind to be with her lover. On November 25, 2016, a fierce argument erupted in the family when Alana told her husband Muhammad that divorce was inevitable. The next day, she consulted a divorce lawyer and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. During her time away, Muhammad frantically sent her messages begging her to reconsider and salvage their marriage for the sake of their children. When Alana returned home on November 30th, she made a final phone call to her parents, attempting to reassure them that everything was okay despite her anxious tone. What her parents didn't know was that Alana had tried to contact the police that evening, but unfortunately, she misdialed the number, which would have devastating consequences. The following day, December 1st, Alana's mother, Anna, tried to reach her daughter, but couldn't get through. So she called her son-in-law, Muhammad, to find out what was going on. In a calm tone, Muhammad deceived Anna, telling her that Alina had abandoned him and their children in the middle of the night to be with another man. Alina's parents were suspicious of Muhammad's story, knowing their daughter would never abandon her children. They contacted a close friend of Alina's who lived nearby, asking her to keep an eye on the Muhammad home while they rushed to Toronto to file a missing persons report with the police. Alana's family was worried when her friend said her car was still in the driveway. When her parents arrived at her house, everything seemed normal, but Muhammad was upset, insisting that Alana was with her boyfriend and that the police had been called unnecessarily. He had already told the police this when they visited earlier. Later, on December 2nd, a man walking his dog near the river, about 24 miles from the Muhammad's home, found a new-looking large suitcase under a bridge. Despite initial hesitation, his curiosity led him to open it, and he was shocked to find the body of a blonde woman inside. He immediately contacted the police, who sent the suitcase and body to the medical examiner to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. Alana's body was easily identified due to a luggage tag on her suitcase from a recent conference trip. Her parents confirmed her identity. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered multiple abrasions and bruises, but the primary cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. The body was found dressed in pajamas, with no shoes, and positioned in a way that suggested she was placed in the suitcase shortly after death. Muhammad, the suspect, was apprehended the same evening at a coffee shop where he was consulting with a lawyer, apparently preparing to flee the country. However, he was caught before he could escape. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the neurosurgeon denied any involvement in the crime. A disturbing aspect of the incident came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unknowingly witnessed her mother's murder. According to Yasmin, she heard screams and noise coming from her parents' room and rushed in. She cracked open the door to see her father kneeling behind the bed, with her mother likely lying on the floor, out of her sight. Muhammad yelled at Yasmin, telling her to leave, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told the girls that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had happened, but she struggled to believe that her father could have killed her mother. To protect Yasmin from having to testify in court, Muhammad confessed to the crime and recounted the events of that fateful evening. Muhammad and his wife, Alana, got into an argument about her infidelity and desire for a divorce. The situation escalated quickly, and Muhammad physically attacked Alana, knocking a phone out of her hand as she tried to call the police. He struck her multiple times in the face, pinned her to the floor, and strangled her. Their daughter walked into the room but couldn't see what was happening because of the bed. When Muhammad realized Alana was no longer breathing, he tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. He had broken her neck during the attack. He then put her body in a large suitcase, drove around for hours, and eventually threw the suitcase off a bridge into a river, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation in the darkness. During Muhammad's trial in 2017, his father, Farid Shamji, caused an uproar by making disparaging comments about his deceased daughter-in-law. Shamji tried to justify his son's actions, claiming Alana had been unfaithful and provoked Muhammad. These comments led to an investigation, and Shamji's medical license was revoked in April 2019. Muhammad was convicted of second-degree murder and received a life sentence, but he will be eligible for parole in 14 years. Since he had already served time during the trial, he could be released as early as 2030. As part of his sentence, Muhammad is not allowed to contact his children or Alana's parents and must pay them a substantial amount of money in compensation. He has also been banned from practicing medicine or teaching again, having his medical license revoked permanently. Alana's parents are now taking care of the children, who have been left without their parents.